Uh, whoa,
Yeah. Oh,
that
hello.
sounded galactic.
This meeting is being recorded.
I've never heard that
Me
before,
either.
so that must be an upgrade. We just had some kind of computer thing tell us out loud that this was being recorded. So that's kind of
Yes.
awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm here, I'm Ida, and I'm here with Angele Baudet. Am I saying
Baudouin. Baudouin.
Baudouin?
Or
Um,
Baudouin, you could even say, like a real English way.
Baudouin.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're going to talk today about consciousness and see where the conversation goes with this. And I know Angele is really interested in consciousness. And so my first question is, how do you define consciousness? Like what for you does consciousness mean?
Okay, I've never thought about that definition, even though I'm sure I've explored it in different moments. Consciousness, yeah, I actually have a trouble answering that.
Okay, can
I
I
guess
tell
it's the
you what I
truth.
think
Yeah,
it
sure. And
is?
then maybe
Yeah.
something will roll off of that.
This only happened because I was listening to a dude. His name is Michael. I don't know, is it Mordid or Mordain or something? Uh,
Right.
and he talks a lot about Jesus. And
Okay.
so his whole philosophy is around consciousness. At
Right.
least that's the way I get it. And so this is just very recent for me. So,
Yeah.
how he defined consciousness, or what I understood him to say through my own filter, was consciousness is remembering our divinity.
Mm,
And I thought, wow, he keeps saying that we've forgotten that we are divine beings. And once we connect with that knowing, it changes the way we are in the world. It brings
right. Right.
consciousness to the
Right.
fact that we were created divinely. We are
Right. Okay.
inherently
Now I can speak on it based on you
cool.
sharing that because I guess it's interesting because divinity, what does that mean to everyone? I love to replace divinity with natural. So
Okay,
that
cool.
that connection that you're just connecting to your natural, truest essence state. But I guess the idea that we are all energy and there's vibrational different rates of vibration, like really to get physicsy on it, like physics of consciousness to me is the fundamental science if we're going to use science in our world. So that idea of Christ consciousness, like, I mean, Christ as the story that we heard through the Bible. I mean, that is my beginnings. I'm kind of an ex-Catholic, but I mean, my mom was also an ex-Catholic. I was raised by an ex-Catholic who I thought demonstrated Christ-like qualities. Like she just connected to the truth of what that was just an example of how one might choose to behave in life. And so there's an energy associated with every thought, every action, and so consciousness really is an energy. And then the idea that are we have this true essence, which is an energy. So I guess consciousness, but I mean, maybe that's not literal. Like some people might not be happy with that kind of definition, but I mean, in the old sciencey way, I think science as a tool, the way it exists in our world, would have a hard time finding consciousness or getting some physical attributes that it wants to say, okay, this is real because of A, B, C, D, E. But really, there is a multidimensionality, and I know that means probably little to many people, but it's not just about the five physical senses. So there's other senses, and science has a lot of trouble when you get outside the five physical senses. And so that's kind of where every human being, like, it's actually it's just so beautiful the way we're designed. Like I love the question, and I mentioned to you earlier, what is a human being, truly and fully? And I don't think we really, in a collective way, know that. But I guess we all have our explorations, and the illusion of knowledge runs the world right now. And to think you know, you stop asking. And so there's something really like almost a safety mechanism within our own personal human development, our own personal consciousness. If you have no interest in curiosity, you will continue to experience life based on the five physical senses. So that's an option. But for people who choose that, and then there's others who don't, like myself, who really deeply, sincerely, enthusiastically, in about 2009, got this idea, well, Jesus was an exemplar. I want to have these experiences too. I want to know what that's about. And so when you are really sincere and you get curious and you start exploring, stuff starts happening. And it's not with just the five physical senses. So I think that's where a lot of people would call that psychic. There's the four clairs, clairsentient, or not, maybe there's more than four, actually there are, but the main ones that I think of: clairsentient, claircognizant. And clairsentient means clear feeling, claircognizant, clear seeing, clairaudient, clear
Audience.
hearing,
Yeah.
and there's clear, whatever the nose one is, clairosmia could be clear smelling, which, we don't usually go there. It's a little more, but for a lot of psychics, smell is a big part of how they get messages. So like, what's all that about? So it's senses outside the physical five. And for myself, I did have my own experience where mediumship just blasted into my experience because of all this enthusiastic and curious questioning. And boom, all of a sudden I'm channeling straight, someone is speaking with my voice. And then I was locked up for 30 days. But I mean, that's not really the focus of our discussion today, but just to show that this is kind of serious, and it can do harm when there's sort of a culture holding so tightly to the illusion of knowledge. So anyway, that,
Do you know what's so interesting, Angele?
yeah,
So I think I've talked to you before about my studies in the master's program, how it was
right.
anti-oppressive, right?
Right. Yes. And I was so inspired by that. Like, it sounded like a real step above kind of the basic education I got through medical school and graduating in 1990. So it was a ways back. And all of our education has a way of kind of putting a template onto our, and belief systems and lenses onto our perception. And boy, I am still clearing some of that. So I'm committed
Yes.
to do so.
It's a programming. It's a
Yes,
programming,
it
Angele.
is.
The education system is a programming.
Yes.
So I didn't even know what I was stepping into. It all was very synchronistic how it all happened. And I thought, wow,
Right.
this is already what I feel and think about the world. So it's
Right.
so interesting. There's a field of study about this, right?
That's
But
right.
but one of the things that we really looked into was, what are we defining as bodies of knowledge? So
Nice.
remember how I said the medical model of treatment was one
Yeah.
of the bodies of knowledge? We went
Right.
X-nay on this because it's who formulated this, why, what's the agenda? It's
Like,
it's
I love
labeling
that. Can
people
I
and
just add?
judging.
I want to just add, like, I think we're at a time now with some of the challenges in our world collectively is to wonder how did this originate is a fabulous question that isn't being asked.
Yes.
And I think a challenge that's come up is the fact that some of these decisions were made generations ago. And then, I can really, really have great compassion and understanding where someone would say, well, what are you talking about? It's always been this way, and if there's a pet peeve in this lifetime, it's we are doing it this way because we've always done it this way. I just think, wow, my heart breaks for people who, and I really ran into that through my whole life's experience in multiple systems. Angele being Angele, I just kept finding myself fully exploring this: banking, education, medicine, like every system I touch, politics. I mean, like, oh my God. So anyway, I just
You
chose
were
to
you were seeing you were
emphasize
running.
that.
Yeah, you were running against the limitations of each of the
Right.
systems.
Well, I guess
And
I'd love to state right here my personal mission statement, which I just adore and live by for the last decade. And I came to it, fairly early on, despite other confusions in my life. I was really clear. My personal mission statement is to enable and empower optimal human health. Not knowing what optimal human health is yet, but having kind of Jesus Christ as an exemplar, some of these
yeah,
fabulous stories. And I think they really are possible, really are possible. I mean, you get to a point where you've met people who've had some of these experiences and they have existed on earth. There's books about them, et cetera, et cetera. But what run into is that I kind of think of the quote by Rumi, seek not for love, but all the barriers that exist against it. That concept, like, here we
mm,
have health. Well, don't seek for health, but I found all the barriers against it. And basically, we have an unsustainable system of systems that had a roadblock every which way you look. And I know that we would likely agree somewhat on that
oh, for
statement.
sure.
Yeah.
So one thing I want to mention about some of these bodies of knowledge. So there was a cool guy out of, I think he's out of Montreal, that we kept utilizing as like the foundation for this anti-oppressive framework in all systems. And
Ah,
his name was Michel Foucault. Have
nice.
you heard of him?
No, but I can see the spelling, Foucoult. Yeah,
Caau,
yeah, AU. Yeah,
Cault.
yeah.
But so what he said is basically we privilege certain bodies of knowledge. And
Right.
he was very interested in the ones we don't privilege, that we
Ah,
suppress
right,
and hold down. And
right.
so my master's paper, my research paper was on how the body is not privileged as as a
Wow.
container of knowledge.
Right.
How intellectual academic thinking is what we've privileged over the
The body's
knowledge of the body.
intuitive, innate sense.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
So
Wow. Can you
my
just
paper,
remind me that the title of your training? Because it's just absolutely phenomenal.
anti-oppressive practice in social work.
Yeah, because it was a social work
It's a
degree,
social work program, my master's program.
but
And it
like, oh, it's your
runs,
master's because your basic social work would, your bachelor of social work would not have included any of this. It was a
no, no,
master's
no.
program.
It was a
Okay.
master's program. And I had no, like I said, I
And
had
where was it based? In your city, or did you
in
have to move?
Ryerson. It's at Ryerson in Toronto.
Okay.
So it's
Wow.
called, it used to be called Ryerson Polytechnical Institute.
Okay.
And I
Yeah.
studied acting there as well and jazz dance.
Is that
Don't
right?
ask me. Okay. But
That's quite an
anyway,
eclectic collection of training and experience. I love it.
and and religious studies was one of my degrees. I have three, right?
Is that
So
right?
it's just so crazy. But anyway, so Ryerson was a polytechnical institute that became Ryerson University
Right,
nowadays. But
right.
so it had this master's program, and I don't know. It's the only one I applied to when I got in, and I don't even know. It was very weird. The whole thing was synchronistic.
Actually, and that what year would this have been? Just to
This would have
put
been
that in perspective.
2012.
Right. Okay. Well, that's just fascinating because look at Toronto now. Like, I mean, Ontario seems to be one of the more restrictive provinces in the country of Canada, and here's Ryerson sitting right in
In the
metropolitan
middle.
Toronto, which is so
In
connected
the middle.
to.
Can I say something? I also think the news reporting about these lockdowns
Mhm.
is going a little bit overboard. And I just want to say that maybe it's my lifestyle, but I don't feel at all hampered in any way
Oh,
with
that's
what
good
they're
to know.
calling these lockdowns in Ontario. And
Okay.
maybe I shouldn't say that out loud. I don't know. I go where I want. I go
Right.
unmasked
Well,
every.
that's ultimately true for all of us. And that's what I
Yes.
find too. I have no idea what's really going on. I just kind of waltz
Yes.
around, act naturally. I don't read any signs. I just go in a store and I see what happens. And usually, just naturally, I get my shopping and I come home. So I have no idea what's going on. And every now and then, I just catch whatever my ear catches. I don't listen to the news. I stopped listening to the news in 2009. So I think that
Wow.
was a lifestyle choice. And I've encouraged so many people since, like for someone's mental health, but everyone often will question, especially at first, they were saying, well, how are you going to know what's going on? I'm like, I'm going to know what I need to know when I need to know it,
Yes, what
which
you
is the,
experience
yes,
will
like
tell you. Do you know
firsthand
what,
experience.
Angele? So do you think that thing that people are talking about is happening, which is in our perceptions, our
Hmm.
world for us individually has not really changed. We're still
Right.
doing everything we do in terms of freedom and in terms of whatever. Yes, I'm being censored on Facebook or
Yeah.
YouTube,
Yeah.
but
I've been censored as well. Hmm.
yeah. So, but really, my life doesn't feel impacted. Maybe if I wanted to go out for breakfast, I can't go sit in a restaurant, but I can still go get a breakfast,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I don't, are we splitting like with our perspectives? Are we in a new earth? Like, we're all the masked individuals that are following these narratives that are afraid to do anything, are going this way, and we're feeling like our lives are still our lives. We're doing what we
Mhm.
do,
Right.
and I don't feel like
Well,
this.
I love that question because, I think what kind of prompted us to get together today was my favorite two questions. What is a human being? What is reality? So we do kind of all have our own reality, which crosses over with others when we do, but ultimately we are all somewhat responsible. Although there are, like, I could say the one biggest change for me is I'm not traveling as I would naturally do
Yeah.
because I've chosen not to be tested and not to mask. And so I'm going to accept that for the short term. But what's interesting out of that is it's really inspired me to discover even more about who I truly am, what is a human being truly. And honestly, something caught my ear. I'll share it here. It's a bit out there for many, but Sai Baba is someone I think who has some knowledge, a base of people who've heard about him. So a man who actually existed on Earth. I don't think he's alive now, but a personal friend of mine had a personal friend in the presence of Sai Baba witness portal travel, witness it with his own two eyes. And so when I hear a close friend of my close friend tell me that, I'm like, okay, like necessity breeds invention. So if I can't travel by airline, maybe I'll find another way. And it could also be some anti-gravity technology. So, I mean, I've got a couple options to explore. And I think that idea that we create our reality, our desires, our rockets of desire, as I think Esther Hicks in the Abraham Hicks
Oh,
world would say, generates creation. There is something that's going to meet that, especially when a group of us, the more connected we are to our true nature, we actually are quite good creators. And to create a new, more efficient, no red tape, no passport, none of that stuff would be really exciting. And so, anyways, I really am open to what's another way that I can travel. So I'm not going to let that limit me. I'm going to let that inspire me to say, hey, what are my other options?
very
Including
cool.
the other, I could even name a couple others, but I won't right now.
So you know what I just want to say about that?
Yeah,
Both you and I have someone we know, Ashton Tulip, but
right.
she's going by Ashton Monea. She portal travels all the time. She
Does
talks
she
about it
really?
all the time. Yeah.
Okay.
She goes into other dimensions and everything. She does battle, she does everything.
Okay, right. And that might be, yeah, I hear what you're saying. And I know a lot of people with that experience too. And I have that experience myself. And I guess I'm just sort of thinking more of in a 3D
Ah,
quote,
yeah.
like my physical body is now going to be in Kauai, like
Yeah,
now.
I would love
Like
that
in this
myself.
Sai Baba story, it was a matter of they were doing a retreat and someone's wife became ill in Australia. And he said to him, would you like to go? And he said, yes. He tapped the wall once and there was sort of this portal opened up and they could see, really high above. There's some land down there. And he tapped it again and all of a sudden it was close. He goes, oh, that's my city. Tapped it one more time. It was his front door. He said, there you go. So he walked through the door. And then his friends took his luggage to him. And then he looked at his passport and saw that it was stamped as if he had come the old fashioned way. Like, I
Wow.
just thought that was an amazing, to me, that kind of story. So that's
Yes.
where being open to your own experience, like, you don't have to be curious, but that's fine. But don't have to denigrate people who are curious.
Yes.
That's
Or
kind of
limit
where we're
or
at now.
limit.
Yeah, like, I mean, you're fine to believe what you want to believe, but I'm
Yes.
really interested and I'm really curious about what's
Oh, that's a
possible for a human being. That's
yes.
ultimately my excitement. I love to explore that.
So you know that there's been predictive programming in movies, right?
Yes, yes, I
So
do.
things like Star Trek, where they had portal
Yes.
travel.
Yeah,
I mean, it was
teleporting.
showing us all of
Yeah,
that, right?
exactly. Exactly. Well, here's the latest thing for me in this year, like with, many blessings that have come through this interesting, strange time politically, geopolitically, or whatever you want to call it, is what was I about to say? We are the technology. I was really quite in the recent years so excited about med beds, and the truth is, in our fullest state, we actually don't even need that because we are such an amazing technology, for lack of a better word. But anything that we've technologically created, we actually can do without the technology. So we need the technology until we're ready to set it down. But then again, that's about thresholds of believability. If you don't
That's
believe
so
you can,
cool.
when you think of telepathy, I mean, I actually have my own conscious awareness of that. I can communicate quite efficiently with certain people, even
Mm.
if they're at a distance. And like there's talk of even picking up a crystal, and we don't need cell phones all of a sudden. Now we've gotten rid of a 5G problem or whatever potential
Yeah.
electromagnetic frequency pollution that might be impacting our health. I mean, just to put it out there, it doesn't hurt to dream up some new ways of doing
I think
things.
this is amazing. I think
Yeah.
that's the potential of humanity. What is a human?
Yes.
There's potential, lots of
Right.
it, of what we don't know. Do you know they talk a
Yes.
lot about our this junk DNA, and I have a
Right.
feeling there's no junk. I
I
think
agree.
it's all purposeful.
I can tell you that I know that that's true. I mean,
Oh,
other people
cool.
can,
I
you
just
know,
I just feel that that's
well,
true and that it
that's
hasn't been
great.
activated. That's what it
Exactly,
is. It has
exactly.
not
Well,
been
what
activated.
is DNA? So here, what is a human being? What is DNA? And I think at the heart of that's kind of our technology. It's multidimensional. Its capabilities are mind-blowing based on our entrained education that we've all, most of us, I can imagine, have experienced, but maybe some of us missed that. But I think the multitude of people on Earth in the Western developed world would have had an entrainment away from even getting curious about DNA. And they think they know what DNA is, and they have all these little bits of biochemistry and they get all excited. Well, that's only the first component. And I think the best information I've ever had about that comes through Cryon channeled messages
Oh,
through Lee
I
Carroll.
listen to Cryon,
And I
yeah.
actually just did a 4-day, it was a 4 class kind of review of a book he channeled in 2010. And now he just did 4 1.5 hour segments to kind of
Wow.
refresh. And it was beautiful. I mean, I really believe
Yes.
that that is true. And I
Yes.
guess, we all have our own little internal divining rod. And for mine, I'm just trusting mine now. I got pretty crazy when I was kind of wondering, what's true, prove it to me, because of that left brain linear logical mindset that I had been entrained to. It actually did create some mental instability as that was kind of trying to figure itself out. And then at some point I thought, well, I don't need to understand everything, but I can certainly have my own experiences and I'll interpret them kind of looking at them on my hand. I don't grasp onto any conceptualized version of my experiences, but I mean, they've been pretty amazing, pretty, like expansive. I think that's the bottom line. Like, I am free to expand my mind and my awareness. It's not even my mind, because really, the mind is a tool that we can use. It's not the CEO of my life, but it's a tool. And I think the other thing that's changed, and I sort of have kind of come into a certain level of medical intuition, my interest in health and the idea that in our brains, our education system and systems have really led to over focus on the left brain. Then there's the
Yeah.
right, and then I literally consciously made a point, like in about 2000, okay, forget the left brain, right brain only. I literally did that experiment, and of course that didn't go very well. But it was pretty entertaining for me now, but I mean, it was pretty dramatic in some ways too. But in the end, now I've come to understand it's the corpus callosum, which is the highway between the right and left brain. So it's about whole brain thinking. So I came to, I've really been delighted in what came to me through my own experience in my own quirky, weird, and sometimes traumatic ways. And then you hear other people talking about it, like Bruce Lipton and
Yes.
Braden. I mean, this idea of whole brain thinking, this is an evolution that is underway right now with whoever, you engage to whatever level that you engage to. But I think people like you and I are engaged. Oh, we want to evolve. And I love to think of it that way. And it's kind of a big deal in that you could almost call our truest nature a different species in a way. I think with the way we define species, the fact of how we'll function when we have full access to what we're capable of and have answered some of that, what is possible for a human being on earth right now.
So
Lots.
that's kind of, I have a couple of different thoughts about that. So sometimes I feel like the native, that I love that word, the native
Yes.
inside, the
Yeah.
native person, the natural
Hmm.
native,
Hmm.
underneath multiple layers of programming and conditioning.
Yes, I do agree.
So it's like an onion peeling away these things.
Yep. Right.
Um, and so I think about it like that sometimes, like, wow, we really have to get rid of the programming first. And
Absolutely.
and the thing that I wanted to ask you about is you use the word mental stability, mental instability. And you know what I
Right.
want to say, working with people that are needing help in that genre,
Right?
there is a level of enlightenment that our systems are looking at as a negative mental
Yes.
instability, but it's
Yeah, good for
I
you.
don't know if I see it that way, because
Well,
we're
it's true.
so
It's funny
focused on
because
functioning. We're so
when
focused on functioning, right?
yes, exactly. Well,
But
when I said it, I've never said that before. I've never really said it, but I say it very
oh,
lightheartedly. Mental instability, talking about some recent, 10
yeah,
years ago and some of the things I've experienced. I guess I say it partly just knowing that might mean something to others, to try and be clear. But to be honest, I agree with you. Like, I think I know clearly, and I've had people in my experience at that time tell me, if you were in India right now, you would be supported and comforted and nurtured in your process that you're undergoing, and you wouldn't be labeled and pathologized and told to take medications for the rest of your life and they would never get better. Like, that's pretty
yes,
anti-human actually to do that to anyone.
yes.
And
In certain
having been a
tribes, you would,
physician,
in
yeah, you
certain
would
tribes,
be
oh, sorry,
revered. No, you're exactly what I know what you're going to say.
go ahead.
But you go ahead. I'm that's the
I was just
telepathy.
gonna,
It gets in the way because I know exactly what you're gonna say. I got it, and then I'm not letting you
okay,
say it.
so what I was gonna say is, in lots of tribes, you would be considered a shaman
Yes,
in
yes,
grooming, right?
right.
So you would be taken
It needs
and
support,
yes,
but it's not a pathology. It's actually an
yes,
evolution. So
yes.
I don't know if that's true for every single person, but I would be.
I
It's a
want to say,
hypothesis. It's a
yes,
hypothesis that it is.
I want to
However,
say,
yeah,
sorry, I just want to say, in my experience, the people that I just marvel over are those that have been, if you want to say, pathologized. I've never felt it was a pathology.
right.
It's convincing the person that it's not a pathology and there's
Yes.
nothing wrong with them and that there's everything right. you know?
Yes. And then that's where the programming comes in because actually, I think what was the most mentally unstable about me was that I literally had subconscious programming fighting against my true nature. Like I actually called it to myself as I had a chance to kind of contemplate that it was almost like I kind of using medical terms just for fun and poking fun at that whole system is an autoimmune energetic disease. Like in the sense that my own programming was fighting against my natural self rising out.
Wow. Wow.
So
That's a
like,
neat way
and
of
that's
looking.
kind of, and you get quite scared. I mean,
I
and
was
it
going to say,
feels
yeah.
pretty uncomfortable. You've got a lot of physical symptoms and then and then I ended up, getting super curious about, well, what actually did happen to me and discovering that in the 70s, there was so many solutions found. And of course, didn't reach out and find the allopathic medical community. And why is that? Like that actually made me very, very angry
That's
because
another body of knowledge that's been suppressed,
yeah,
right?
all the solutions were known long before I had this experience.
Yeah.
And I had to relearn it. But maybe there is a magic in that many people through their own experience learned that this just isn't the optimal way to treat human beings. So I know that now. I can say that so authentically because I'm both a physician and a patient.
So would you say that that was a journey of consciousness raising for you?
Yes, absolutely.
So that's how
And
consciousness and the
yes,
curiosity, can I say that? Is that how it happened?
yes, yes.
Yeah.
It's really like I think I shared with you is I have a website, bovera.ca, and I kind of built it with a friend, and he's also a consciousness wisdom coach. And so it was kind of cool that he also happened to have the skills to make websites. And I really was happy with what he did. And I asked him at one point to change my header to say Bovera University. And he was, even history, look, what are you talking about? That's not a university, but Bovera University, where willingness is the only requirement. And Bovera means beautiful truth. I mean, willingness really is the only
Oh,
requirement.
there, yeah.
It's the only requirement. Like there's nothing to
Wow.
do. It's natural. It's a
Yes.
natural process that you must allow and look
What
for
do you,
in the right places for the support that you need. Because what was I going? I was going to say something.
sorry.
Well, I guess the triggered what made it really unstable for me. Like you talked about the onion peeling off, and like for some, I think I want to just share that, and I may have already done this with you personally, but one of the biggest mistakes I made in this lifetime, like in my mental processing, was believing we're all the same. I really, really, truly did, due to my
Mhm.
allopathic training, saying, okay, I got to figure out what a human being is, and then I can just deliver the good news and know what to do. But really, I think we may be we're quite similar, but we're different too. And so the kind of soul that I am had a lot of requirements to unpeel. There's a lot of layers to peel off. So I got really enthusiastic about a process of past life regression, did 3 in 1 week. And that, I mean, I wanted it all right now. I was calling it in and I got exactly what I asked for. It's just my body was physically like wiped, overwhelmed, overloaded. And even the person who helped me with that process didn't advise it. She just said, no, that sounds like too much. And I'm like, no, 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 I want it right now, right now. Like I had this idea, it was a short little journey, just okay, there I am. But I basically opened up kind of the upper chakras, and then there was so much debris and non-clearing and all these programmings that that's where it became really chaotic. And it can be very gentle. So I hate to share my story in a way to think that that's true, because I really want to emphasize we're not all the same. So that's why I like to kind of have the conversation to say, well, yeah, Angele was a little bit of a cowboy, very brave and very in a hurry, like you don't have to be that way. I wouldn't recommend it. But to really settle into this is a natural process, and I can take that, let it come in with ease and grace, and aware that there are some layers that do have to come off, and there's many tools and modalities. And I really encourage people to follow the breadcrumb trail. Your own intuition will kind of just spark up. You'll get excited about something and look into it, see what it's about. Like I've probably done over 100 sessions with different alternative practitioners. Like that's a
Wow.
lot. And it became kind of like a hobby because of my personal mission statement to enable and empower optimal human health. For the early years, I was looking for the magic. Where's the magic? Let me be the magician. Like I want to get this magic. And it's kind of a funny as I look back. And now I know that's not my job to do it for other people. It's my job to do it for me. And it's everyone's job to do it for themselves. So that's quite opposite to allopathic medicine. Because I honestly, I practiced full time for 5 years, and I really got frustrated with the lack of personal agency in the patients. They really didn't want to do anything, think about anything, just give me the magic pill, doc. And at the end, I couldn't even write a prescription. I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? And I went through all kinds of mental gymnastics. How could I make my practice more interesting for me? Because this is so futile. And I ended up leaving the profession, and I call it spitting into the wind, just because I just somehow deeply intuitively knew this isn't going to work in a widespread way if we want to enjoy optimal human health. And to this day, I don't know what that means, but I have a much grander vision of it today than I did when I left medicine completely in 2002. So things, it's
I
interesting.
I heard what you said about agency, and I think the
Yes.
allopathic system encourages dependency.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, on people that we put in guru positions,
Yeah,
in medication that we put in guru positions. And
that's
it's
right.
what one of our mutual friends, his theory about people want to be led. They
Yeah.
want to follow, they don't want to exercise agency. And this brings me to the next question that I think is really important because you discussed it. There's a curiosity that motivates all of
Yes.
this exploration
Right.
and consciousness. It's
Right.
curiosity, right?
Hmm.
What do you think has happened that we've lost this sense of curiosity and wanting, like that so many people want to follow and be dependent? Like where is
Right.
that loss of curiosity? How did that happen?
Thank you for asking, because I've been asking myself that question for a decade. Like,
Ah,
how can I just inspire a little curiosity? And I can see, looking back, how just my own lack of balance and grounding made it. I wasn't a very good messenger then, but I feel like I'm ready now to just human to human have conversations. And I partly answered that question as I talked about the fact that when we think about the origins of our systems, and they were generations ago, like it really focuses it down where everyone's got their eye on the microscope, and they just need to take their eye off the microscope and learn from their own experience. But Yeah, and what else was I going to say about that? I've lost whatever came when you were asking the question.
Yeah, I think that fundamentally for me, I've always had this sense of curiosity. So it's
Right.
always propelled me forward.
Hmm.
I didn't kind of just want to take, even in my family of origin, I just didn't want to take whatever they said as the truth. I
Right.
had like, let's just see, is there something else
Mhm.
other than what these people, I call them these people, my family,
Yeah.
what these people are telling me. What the
Right.
hell, what are they
Right.
telling me?
Yeah,
There's
you were questioning the truth. Actually, my answer returned. It was the idea, and I think we both will have something to say about this. It's just what is a human being? What's possible for a human being is one thing, but what is a human being these days? And the idea that there's some really similar themes, as much as we're all different on many levels, and some levels, I should say. Maybe we're not identical, but there are some common themes of core woundings. And so those core wounds, I think, do get in the way of people's really natural curiosity being able to form, because we have worthlessness, we have blame, shame, guilt that might have been part of our childhood imprinting, if I could call it
yeah,
imprinting, and kind of wounding in a way. And so that carries forward into adulthood. And then now we've got all these people who need to puff themselves up pretty big. I know, and I'm this, and I'm powerful, and I've got a
grandiosity.
lot of money, and whatever. So I think that it's just so common. It could be called normal, but I put it in quotations. Really, what's optimal? What's normal? I think we
Yeah.
have a normal equals suboptimal in my natural.
Yes, yes. So
I
this,
just always
yeah.
translate it. So we've got this natural, it's just so common. I love Don Miguel Ruiz in his
Oh,
famous
yes,
book, The Four Agreements.
yes,
I loved his analogy saying, okay, everyone has the same skin condition. When one cures, they're going to look like they're the diseased one. And I honestly think that is kind of at play here. I mean, I hate to be, but don't shoot the
no, no,
messenger. This is
no.
my observation of life based on all my experience, 52
Yes,
years,
because
and
when
maybe
we,
thousands of lifetimes having come here before, because I do believe in reincarnation or parallel lives, whichever way you want to look at it. But that gets recorded in our DNA. So that's where I think some of us are a little more curious than others, possibly because of this multidimensional DNA holding memories of how many times we've been here and how many times we've seen. We got to see there's a pattern, it's a cycle. We're caught in a loop, we're stuck in a loop, we're stuck in a loop. And then when we start peeling off those layers and going, wow, this feels better. And then, people will shoot messengers like that. That has been a trend, the kind of that witch hunt mentality. Like I was just talking to my 16-year-old son because I'm kind of doing my own version of it, home education, because he's being educated through the public school system. We're a
mm,
two-household family, so that wasn't my decision by myself to consider homeschooling, which we never did because the kids weren't interested and their father wasn't either. But now I was just telling about what is a witch. A witch, traditionally I think it was someone who just had a great body of knowledge and understanding how different things in nature would help support the health of a human being. So witches, warlocks. We were just talking about this, and he said, "Oh, I always thought a male witch was a wizard." And I said, "Oh no, I think a wizard is more a bigger thing, energetic alchemist, and a metaphysical practitioner, and not just about nature and herbs and plants." And so, anyways, I just think, nature. When you think about, it's interesting that's coming up in our conversation because pharmaceuticals. Well, who came up with the idea that we needed to grab little elements of nature, synthesize, these products when we actually had nature? Like nature has a wisdom in it, that it has a tended, I mean, there are always exceptions to every rule, but there's so many, any negative effects in a plant. I heard someone share with me that usually the antidote grows within 3 feet.
yeah, that was
That
me.
was you. Yeah, that's right. Because I was really inspired by hearing that. And I do believe that's true. Like, and then just ashwagandha is a herb that I started taking about six
I'm
months
taking
ago.
that now because of you.
Okay, I love it. My 16-year-old son is all enthused to take it. I mean, it has many benefits. And for him, he's into, trying to look his best and be physically fit. And so he learned that cortisol goes against testosterone. So he likes this idea. And he's just been sharing with me how his body seems to be working better. And he only started it this
Yeah.
week. And so he was just
Wow.
telling me this today. So, anyways, like an herb like ashwagandha, as I think of it from a medical intuitive sense, as a former physician in that line of thinking too, is just I could just give that to everybody I know. Like, there's just no risk.
Yes.
There's just no
No
risk.
side effect.
And when I think of my days peddling pharmaceuticals, oh my God, like I would always be very cautionary and just telling the patient, well, we should, and then my favorite thing to do is take people off of medication. And they wouldn't even let me. They'd say, oh, Dr. B, no, the doctor put me on it for a reason. And in my mind, I'm thinking, if you knew the reason, you'd be freaking dropping it right now. They're not thinking that tenderly about you. They're just kind of,
Following.
it's a
They
system,
want to
it's an
be led.
indoctrination. Yes. So anyway, a little interesting tangent. Zoom, zoom,
You
zoom.
know what? I love it. So I just want to say that you said quite a bit that triggered some thoughts for me. So what you basically said in my world is when people are in survival mode, which I consider to be a trauma response, they aren't able to have curiosity because they're trying
Yes,
to
it's a
just
luxury they
survive.
do not have.
Yes.
I love how you helped me come up with that right there.
Yeah. So,
Yes.
yeah. So a lot of my clients are there. They're
Yeah,
in this survival mode and
I
they
see it all
don't
around
have
me.
the
It breaks my
capacity.
heart when I
Yes.
know that we could offer comfort income to everyone and allow them
Yes.
to discover who they truly are and what they
Yes.
truly,
Yes.
everyone has a gift to serve and
Yes.
share and be fulfilled. We're all worthy. And anyway, so
Yes.
it's heartbreaking when you
A lot of the people I work with are fearful of that. So I'm traumatized and I'm in survival mode. So
Mhm,
I can't work right now. I'm not ready for any of that. But how
right,
do I live?
right.
So it's just become like a
Can you imagine their
struggle.
cortisol levels?
Yes.
A little ashwagandha in the water instead of fluoride might
Oh
go a
my
long, long
God.
way.
I know. I know. Do you think when we know that the food has been poisoned, the water has been poisoned, that we are being sprayed by chemtrails, um, even what I heard about the supplements and pharmaceutical both, because the pharmaceutical now is getting into
Yeah, exactly.
herbal medicines and
Mhm.
homeopathy and all of that because they see it's making money, right? So they're
Right.
switching gears. But each of those things that you take is has a
A
barcode,
vibration has a vibration too.
and a vibration and a
Yeah,
barcode.
right.
And when you ingest it, there is these barcodes that
Right. I've
they
heard
know
that perspective.
that they've got
Yeah,
like you enslaved to these things.
right.
And so let's talk a little bit about this because this is important, I think. When you ask, what is a human? What a great question.
Mhm.
Nowadays, I'm going to say from all the smart dust and nanotechnologies and whatever, I'm not sure because we have ingested technology. I know you're looking at us as a technology, but literally,
Yeah, like an outside force technology that vibration might not be as high and it's not going to
exactly, it's an
support our
AI.
human
It's an AI, artificial intelligence, but
right.
it's implanted in our bodies. Apparently, all of us have it because of all this crap.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, when you think about what is a human now, how much of us are being influenced? And I hear people online talking like this. I had a dream about John F. Kennedy Jr. Now, the person said, now I don't know if that's artificial intelligence implanting that in my brain while I'm sleeping, or, this
Yeah.
is how they're
Like the fact,
talking.
yeah, I love the people who are questioning because it's true. I think, like I read a book called Limitless Mind by Russell Targ, and he was very influential in working in the remote viewing for the CIA and the psychic, quote, psychic powers or this higher human potential that the CIA is well aware of. They know
Oh
a
my God,
lot about
super
how we work.
soldiers.
Yeah, and then there's this, yeah, super soldier program, space. I mean, there's a lot out there,
All
but
the MK Ultra stuff.
yeah, so I mean, I think that's a great question. Whenever we have any thought, is this my thought? Is this me naturally thinking this, or is this an influence outside of me? So I love that that person was asking that question because I think, well, that's where some of my mental instability came too. Just wondering, well, where are these thoughts coming from? What is really me? And and it getting into some new believability thresholds. But I guess your own experience is important. however, the idea of what's possible, that's where multiple perspectives, having an awareness to say, well, it is possible that someone could be influencing my thinking. So that's really good. Like when you talked about entertainment and all of that, somehow I've learned that I'm very good at really picking through what, what seem, I would self-proclaim myself to say like what's natural, what's not. Like I can see them like a movie like Independence Day trying to create this idea that there might be this alien invasion. Well, my own experience would say, well, that's someone trying to create something that I'm not interested in. I've had my own experience with benevolent galactics, and I think, there are many, many, many benevolent galactics. And so we do have to kind of curate our own experience to some extent
You're
too.
talking about discernment. You've got
Yes,
discernment.
yes.
How
So,
did you cultivate that?
and that kind of, like, I literally have never thought this before this conversation, but I'm repeating what I'd already said, the idea that we're not all the same. Some of us souls have been around the block more than others, so
Yeah.
that we saw the patterns. We needed to have multiple lifetimes, access to some version of memory of whether they are actually us physically, our little God spark, or if they're just parallel lives, but we are aware of the fact that there's a cycle going on here that we want to break. We desire to break it. And in that desire, we discover more, and we are becoming a pretty powerful, empowered force to do so. That
Yes.
is the only way change will occur, is from the deep and sincere, high integrity desire to change. And when it is for the benefit of everyone, that's pretty phenomenal. Like the synergy that can come when coalesced desires really start to bear fruit.
You know what? This reminds me of that whole thing I keep hearing. The reason that all of these measures are so hard, or they're saying they're so hard, I don't
Right,
experience them as so hard,
right.
um, is because they're meant to awaken people. Because only when the people are awakened and they're standing in that knowing, the consciousness and
Hmm.
sovereignty of it
Right,
all, then it all comes toppling down. It can't
right.
come toppling down until we
Well,
awake.
there's probably a tipping point that I feel we've actually reached, but there is sort of a lag time of it coming out in the physical.
Oh,
There's
that's
a,
neat. I
there's
never
kind
heard
of,
of that. Like
yeah, there's a,
there's a lag.
yeah, so there's a lag. And at the same time, it is, I always see that anything that can happen, there's two sides of the coin. There can be a negative agenda, quote positive agenda. So
Yeah.
yeah, like I've come to actually have deep, deep gratitude for this, whatever this is, like my favorite story really that it is that it was a fabrication, and it came with a negative agenda of trying to ultra dominate these beautiful what can be very empowered creator beings. And so when you start getting control of that thought and you're directing the creation of a large population, I mean, that must be fun to play with, for some of these people who got interested in that. And this probably was generations ago. That is my favorite perspective of what I understand. And
Do you see them as malevolent intentions?
well, I would define it as malevolent to take away the freedom of
Yes.
everybody for the
Yes.
benefit of so few. I would call that
Yes.
malevolent myself, and I can
Yes.
imagine maybe different people feel differently. But I mean, even from my, here I am, a physician trained. I mean, I was trained in a group of 120 others the same year, and every year about 120 physicians come out of the University of Alberta. And the instant I heard about this and heard about PCR testing, I'm like, what? Like, what is that? That is like a research tool. It's such a non-specific tool. I remember when I first, and I was just, it's interesting because I often get to understand my past better. Like I chose to, my egoic choice to do some summer research between the first and second year of medical school because it would look good on my resume, resulted in me getting in contact with the PCR technology. And I remember thinking, well, that's a freaking like a dull knife, you know what I mean? Like it's such a non-specific tool.
Yes.
This is little chunks of this length of protein and they can add it. I'm like, oh my, like talk about tedious, talk about like get your eye down to the electron microscope. Like what, that's not relevant. That's not practical. And
Why
that they were
even?
using it as a diagnostic test. And the man who, like, I just honestly couldn't believe it. So there was sort of a a shock and and trauma, really, to know as this was starting out that everyone was using these tests in this way. So that's my personal experience, is that is a really dull knife, my friends. And it's
You
just
know he's
kind of
dead,
crazy that you're
right?
not even allowed to ask the question. So when you have a system that has no way of questioning their own assumptions, science by its nature is very much about curiosity and testing hypotheses and questioning
Yes.
assumptions. And we just don't have it in place. There's nothing in the system for it. Another thing I'm just calling to add in from our former, like you were talking about the system and how they take away the agency. Well, guess what we have? We have a population of overwhelmed caregivers on all levels, in the family, in the professions. Like, they disempower the individual, and then they're overwhelmed having to look after all the disempowered individuals. Like, I have to say, I laugh, because here, 5 years of full-time practice, I remember just looking around going, okay, who's going to inspire me? Who's practicing in a way that, and I'm like, zero inspiration. These are not
Oh,
healthy human beings that are working in the health industry. And the amount of politics and, lobbying, political lobbying, and it's like, bye-bye. So just to throw that out there, like, take a look at anyone, and then they even look at like lawyers and judges. Like, everyone's so overwhelmed, they had such an inefficient system, they can't even, like, they have that, also that same issue where
they're
they
in
can't
survival mode.
sit back and reflect, what am I doing here? Like, who made up these rules 2 generations ago? Like, some of our traffic laws and all these various laws, like, rules and regulations are quite robotic, and and you're getting in a very narrow, non-expanded state. I mean, I have an experience that I wrote in an article that still I haven't published, but it seems so petty. But at the same time, I got a certain ticket on a day in a way that just, there was nothing to do with safety. It's just ridiculous. And the fact that some citizen complained that, when there's an indicator light, you push a button and then everybody stops for the pedestrian. And then
Yes.
we all turn left, everyone stopped and we all turn left, and there's a stop sign there. But right now everyone stopped at a red light. So some citizen complains to the police department, people are all turning, they're not stopping at the stop sign. And I'm like literally, when you think about that level, and I actually, because I'm so interested in consciousness, and I've often used this scale first put out in the Power versus Force book by, I always forget his name, David Hawkins, I think, or
Oh,
anyways,
yes.
Hawkins. So there's a
Yeah.
0 to 1,000 scale. I literally in my
Yes. The
mind said, okay,
consciousness scale.
because I even said to the cop, I said, okay, are you serious? Like, safety an issue? Hello. We created a traffic jam because it's like 20 minutes while the school's coming in, it's really busy. And so everyone has to kind of make use of that red light, the pedestrian red light, to get 5 or 6 or 7 of us around, right? To get on their way. So it's like a 20-minute little microcosm of traffic, and I get a ticket, and he goes, well, I'm helping you. And he gave me a ticket for failing to observe a traffic signal. And it was so funny because my own integrity, in the end, I gotta fight this. Like, I can't plead guilty, number one, to this, and I want to be heard. And so I literally went to court, and it was insane. It was just insane. They were robots. Like, literally, the first person I presented to literally lied to me in court, saying, oh, your cop's here, and yeah, you should plead guilty, like really badgering me to plead guilty. I'm like, well, I got this far. I'm going to be heard today. Thank you very much. Well, it turns out the cop wasn't even there. And so, and so then I ended up having to go back another day. And it was just, I called it mental masturbation, like, just to watch these people with
Yes.
all these rules and regulations, and they take it so seriously. And I'm like,
Yes.
safe driving occurred that day. There was nothing unsafe about what I did. And if no one actually stops to go, okay, everyone stopped at a red light, that's a great time to turn left. Like, it's not a big deal. And oh yeah, I was getting to the fact that I just, on my mind, I thought, okay, someone complained about this. I thought, oh, let me just put myself, like, I'm kind of good at this. I just say, oh, I wonder how it feels. What level of consciousness phones the police about this? This situation. Like, I lived in the neighborhood for 20 years, so I've done it for 20 years. And if I were to not do it, I'll
Wow.
probably get rear-ended. You know what I mean? Like, this is a culture. For 20 minutes, we all get around when we can. You know what I mean? So, like, you got to put it all holistically together, right? So I actually tapped into that level of consciousness of the person who would do that. And that's someone who, you can imagine the wounds they're carrying, right? That they somehow are so focused on, there's a stop sign and they're not stopping. I'm like, widen your view, my dear. Like, what the heck are you talking about? This is totally
It's a
fine.
trauma response. Hypervigilance
Yeah,
is trauma
And I
response.
think I came up with a number and it was like 300, and that's on that scale. Like, like this is someone who's quite troubled to make that choice. And even the cop was like, and they never came again, but they felt they had to respond because someone, so this is our system. Someone, oh my God, I'm really upset. The people are stopping at the stop sign. I hate to be derogatory, but I mean, that is really, I have a lot of compassion for how narrow, how constricted a life must be when you choose those kind of actions. But
Do you know where I learned about that? About how when one person complains, it then becomes like a rule
right,
for everybody.
yes, this is what our world is built of, right? It's
Yes,
just been snowballing, and it's getting so, like, I now am not complying with traffic laws because it's not about safety. It's usually always about money. It's just a
yes,
cash grab.
yeah,
It's like, no thanks,
yes.
you're not grabbing my cash anymore.
And
So
it's
we have to
another
stand up.
control mechanism. It's
Yeah.
another thing of control. So you know where I learned about that? Oh God, this was so weird. Talk about, you know how you were saying you turned around in your profession to look at who can I learn from?
Yeah,
Who can I?
right.
The same thing happened with me. So I saw this huge, oh my God, same like well, the veil being lifted from my
Right.
eyes when I worked in prison. So
Oh.
I had a team of four other social workers like myself.
Hmm.
And I was like, these people are not in integrity. They're all afraid. They're all
Hmm.
about rules.
Right, you lose your humanity. I mean,
Oh
that's
my
actually a
God.
path towards disconnecting from who you really are. I can say that authentically right now.
Yes.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yes.
And
You either have to,
how
yes, you
inhumane
either,
to be looking after other human beings when you are in this contracted, rigid, very non-judgmental and all these horrible,
what
your
happened to
wounds are
me?
just running around creating more wounds in others.
Yes. What happened to me was I didn't function the way that they functioned in the world and in my job in the jail.
Hmm.
And talk about a control mechanism being in there. Do you know what the first thing that all the inmates would read? It wasn't the Bible,
What?
it was the criminal code. They all would get a copy of the criminal code, like
Are you kidding me?
no, all the criminal codes, and they would read every single one and to figure out how to buck the system. This
Right.
is how smart they are. And
Right.
the next second favorite one was the Bible. but
That
but
is fascinating. Cool.
it was such a but you know what? I was very traumatized in there because
I
I
bet.
ended up supporting the inmate population and talk about robotic control mechanisms. I ended up writing 10 complaints against the staff on behalf of the inmates to the superintendent of the jail.
Ooh, how
So,
did that go over?
not good. What ended up happening is the inmates were talking to me all the time saying they call me miss. That's the language, right?
Right.
Miss. So they said, miss, you know that they've all banded together in the jail, the staff against you, and they're going to make your life hell in order to service us now. And they did that. They put my life in danger. I can't tell you so many effing times.
Is that
They,
right?
yeah, they did all kinds of things
And did the inmates, they
to
felt good
sabotage
about
my
you?
work.
Did they
Sorry?
feel, did the inmates kind of feel protective over you and you were safer with them than any of the other staff
I
would have been?
felt that way. I
Yeah,
felt that way.
yeah,
But there's inmates that, you know,
yeah. Could
there's
go
no
a
hope
little,
for.
yeah, right.
but
A little
but
more risky to be in their
yes.
presence. Yeah, yeah.
But yeah,
Mm.
what an experience that
That
was.
is fascinating to me.
It was
Oh,
such a do you know what would happen? One thing would happen with the inmates, and then they'd create a rule for all of them.
right.
And that's where I saw that happening. Just because one inmate screwed up,
Yeah.
now everyone has to pay. It's a way of controlling the herd,
And you
right?
know what it is? It's their own fear. They're fearing to be safe. But if you actually treat someone like an animal, they become an animal. I've
Well,
actually not had, that's one system I haven't had personal experience with yet, but I'm very fascinated with it. And my son is too, my 16-year-old. And so we've watched a lot of shows about prisons around the world. And,
I
you
was
know, and I know
there.
people who've been in prison. So I've really enjoyed hearing their firsthand
I,
stories. But
I
and I
don't,
guess being in psychiatric hospital was like a prison. So that is
yes,
kind of, I really
yes.
felt, and my mom, as a lawyer, she told me, oh, Angele, you have less rights than a prisoner would when you're under the Mental Health Act. So, I
Oh,
mean, so, and
probably,
I guess in
yes.
a way I did have my own prison experience, and it was eye-opening, and it was very inhumane. And so
Yes.
they are so afraid of being hurt by these patients, but if you treated them humanely, they become human. So
You
there's
know what's
that,
so,
really is a
so
common theme.
interesting? The parallel here.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
found out things in there. Like first you have to take an oath to the queen when
ah,
you work in the
really,
prison, and you're not allowed to talk about anything that goes on the prison in the prison with the news or anybody like that. Like it's the
of
best kept
course,
secret.
right,
So some of the things I saw in there were just, I can't, it traumatized me. There was one inmate, just to let you know,
hmm,
who was cognitively very dysfunctional,
right,
probably had the capacity maybe of a 5-year-old cognitively.
mm. Oh
And you know
gosh,
what they did was they saw a woman, this was their crime. They saw a woman with with a baby, and they took the baby and ran.
mm.
That person, when I got there, was already in jail for 10 years, and his family signed him his rights over. So instead of putting him into a mental
Care,
institution, yes, do you know what they figured out between the mental health hospital and the jail?
but
That it was cheaper,
to put him in
$30,000.
jail.
Yes. So he didn't belong there. I'm telling you,
Mm,
he didn't belong there. Yeah, look at how sick you
mm.
feel. Do you know how sick? Yeah. There
No,
was
actually, I like just to know like this is happening. And like some people love to just sit and not know what's going on. I actually do want to know what's going on. But I mean, their solutions are they're in place right now. It's actually happening. It's just
So it costs
amazing.
something like
Like you,
120,000 for a bed in a mental and 30 in the jail. So they kept him in jail, and his parents signed that waiver, like to just keep him there.
right.
They never came to see him.
Yeah,
They
how
had to put,
inconvenient to have a child who needs some care, who grew up and didn't and needs extra care. I guess that's the true nature of a society will be how they treat their more vulnerable populations.
yeah, the most marginalized. But
Hmm.
anyway, it was an eye awakening. I work both with men and
Wow,
women in there, so I got
right,
a taste for the difference. And
right.
there was lots of evil in there. Like I could
Mm.
feel as soon
Yeah,
as you walk in and the doors slam behind. I mean, it's an incredible experience, but it was traumatizing for me. I'm
sounds
not
like, yeah, and my medical training was traumatizing for me too, because yeah, it's ugly out there. For a tender heart and you want the best for everyone, it's pretty tough to witness what's going on in the world.
Yes. So I'm looking at our time, and I just want to get back before we wrap up
Yeah,
about consciousness. So
yes, yeah, there we go. We went on tangent.
yes, how do we move forward with this concept of consciousness? What should I hate the word should. What can we do to help ourselves along the way in terms of consciousness?
Yeah, I guess there's that idea of curiosity. I mean, I imagine
Yes.
anyone watching this has at least a little bit of openness and curiosity. But at the same time, is this video going to be viewed by the choir? You know, everyone who's already curious and
Yes.
aware and this kind of thing. So I think about that a lot. Like, how can we? But I think that's where the beauty of the corona protein message is maybe it's actually generating a newfound curiosity amongst people. That's one possible fact that I haven't really witnessed in my life so far yet, but I kind of can see how it could get there. But ultimately, we really can only control ourselves. And so it really
Yes.
comes down to doing, like, I think I really believed this before intellectually, but I've embodied it deeper since this strange geopolitical storm hit the world. And it's like, wow, this technology, if I can be the best and most natural version of myself in freedom and compassion and kindness and all those good things, and yet stand up for myself. I'm not going to be a floor mat.
Yeah.
And the more of us that do it, I mean, I guess if we are acting through unresolved trauma, I think we're going to be less inspiring to others. So if there's anything that we can do, it's to be aware. Boy, it's tricky. There's some booby traps inside each one of us. And I really call them booby traps in my own experience. I would catch them and I'm like, oh, wow, that's not me. That's not my natural self, but where did that come from? And I know where it came from. But the booby traps are in our mindsets, and then the
Can you
idea.
share? Can you share where do you feel these booby traps come from?
Well, I think it's just like you were saying, sort of that imprinting from our education and these belief systems. But then, like, I really, I think one that most people could relate to is even the idea of, if you were to see a galactic being land on a ship and come in front of you, would you be afraid? Where does that fear come from? To me, that's a booby trap, because I've had my own experience communicating with them. And then I recognized, yet I still have the booby trap of being afraid of the idea of them being in front of me. And the truth is, because of the physics of consciousness, they exist in a state that might be physically overwhelming for us, because we may not be able to hold that high vibration, and it would be kind of overwhelming, like how I felt when I first blasted open and started running way more energy through my physical body, and I couldn't cope. It was very overwhelming. So that could, and they know that, so they're very gentle. I mean, if they were going to take over the world and have an alien invasion, they have the technology to have done it, but they don't have, like, I think we tend to project our own mindset onto others. And so galactics are so benevolent and so evolved, and they're really interested in peace and harmony, to the point where, like, they actually are, we're curious about them, they're curious about us. Things that I've learned just through my own collaborations and sharing is, like, our art and our music, like, we have so many wounds and patina and our intensity that comes underneath the creative process, especially the way our world runs, so that there's sort of this tortured souls express themselves through music and art. So they are not capable of that, because they just don't have that in them, whereas we do. So they kind of value it, and, like, they think it's really fascinating. And because I do a fair amount of communication, so it's interesting just to see how neutral they are. They're so non-judgmental, they're so loving. And we think they want to invade us. Like, that's us projecting our own inner state onto another
So wait a minute,
species.
you don't think there's any malevolent beings out
Well,
there?
there are, but there's more. Like, the fact is, if there was the desire, I mean, they oh, I don't even know if we want to go here near the end, but I do believe the malevolent galactics have been running some shows here on Earth for hundreds of years. And that's what's been in the tunnels. And there literally have been reptilian beings, and they are carnivores, and their source, there's sort of some arrangements were made with some power elites from the human who provided them with food source. And that's missing children every year for
Yes, yes.
time immemorial. So, so that, they obviously, for whatever reason, it stayed as hidden as it is. The agreements were made. Their needs were simple. They felt like they got what they needed from us, and so. But that there's been a war. There's been a consciousness war going on for years and years, and so now, like, the benevolence have been protecting us more
So
than we know.
I hear that they feed on us
Hmm.
anytime that we are negative. I hear loosh, the word loosh a lot.
Yeah, the
Um,
idea of our energies being
yes,
used.
they feed
Yeah,
on they feed off of our negativity. And
yeah, I do believe that. And then when you think of, like, alcoholics and certain drug addiction states, that is such an opportunity for different entities to come in, and they do come in, and they do, like, so people will see some horrible behavior in human beings. I was actually, it's funny that this is coming up again, because just as you were trying to wrap up, I was just about to go into, there's a psychiatrist who I really admire, Russell Razak. He's in England, and he wrote a book called Breaking Down to Break Through, or something like that. But anyway, he's been involved with the kind of an overhaul of the psychiatric system, and he's got, like, some amazing work is being done, peer assisted open dialogue, they call it. So he's quite, but he has short little video, being that I've become quite familiar with a lot of material he shares. In the short video, he did share that he got so curious. He was working in forensic psychiatry. Some horrendous acts have occurred in human beings. And he would ask them, like, they would sort of get better. And he'd say, so what do you think made you better? And he said 7 out of 10 would say the spirit, the entity left. And so, like, yeah, as much as we want to pay attention to 5 physical senses, well, this is happening and it's having an impact. And to be aware of it helps us to, resolve and tighten up those. This is an uncared for human being who ends up becoming a really big victim of this takeover, which results in damages occurring, like people are killed, people are raped. So it's not to say it's all roses, but the truth is a human being in their natural empowered state has a lot of power, and those kinds of entities will never have an influence over that person. But the trouble is, if we're in the middle of mixing it up and trying to figure out what our natural state is, they will take opportunities if given. I don't know, I hate to say it because it sounds kind of scary, but it isn't really, because we have the power. And if anyone is in that transition state and they do have it, you could just say, I say no, go away. Like, when you declare that in your own sovereignty, that does have an impact. I mean, that
Oh,
was
I
something
say
I
that all the
learned.
time. I
Yeah,
say fuck
you are
off.
safe.
You know what I actually wrote? I say fuck off all the time to
Yeah,
Nano. I say no Nano and no AI. Fuck off and leave me alone. That's what
yeah,
I say.
that's true. And anything we do have, we can transmute, we can get rid of, excrete. I mean, this is where empowering and enabling this natural state, boom, we're self-healing mechanisms, boom, everything, AI, entities, all that stuff. So when we're interacting in the world and we're not looking after others and they're becoming so low, that's where it is. Like, none of us are, if one of us is in chains, none of us are free. I do believe that. And that kind of comes into this sort of quantum physics of what a human being really is. We are all connected. So if we want to ignore all these victims, it will impact our lives, even if you don't realize it. If you're not consciously aware, I can tell you it does impact our lives. So when you don't care about those disempowered, vulnerable populations, you are kind of preventing your heaven on earth experience without being aware. You might not be consciously aware, but this is where a holistic approach and understanding what we really are and what we're really capable of. I mean, if everyone knew what we're talking about here right now, I mean, we would just stop. Politics would end. Financial system would be written tomorrow, wouldn't it? Right?
If
Legal
we
system.
remembered our divinity, that's what
Yes,
I
I really believe that. I truly, deeply, sincerely believe that. And
yes. So
it's
I
nice
wanted
to.
to say that what you're talking about sounds very like in alignment with our friend. Do you know our friend?
Arcade?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh
It's
yeah, for
very,
sure.
the two of you
Absolutely.
seem to
Well,
be
I
very
found
aligned.
his YouTube channel because I was already there too. Like, it's just so cool when you get your own. Well, I guess I know we're going a little long, but like in
Okay.
2012, when I had this, I called in, like, blew my mind. Like, I got given this vision. Like, it's not even vision, it's just the knowledge and awareness of all that I've just said. But all at once, boom, like, wow.
Wow.
Just the idea that in the natural state, when we're empowered, when we're natural, the hospitals will be empty. Like, I was literally shown while I was
Wow.
in a hospital being committed
Wow.
as mentally incapable of whatever, like I was in this
Parallel
transition.
timelines.
I was in this chaos. Yeah, that's true. And then actually, the second time I was locked up in psychiatric care, the whole theme of that particular time was all about persecution. Like, I was literally clearing so many past lives where I was persecuted and locked up. It's like,
Wow.
so like, if we are going to lock people up, I mean, anyways, for me, it was a kind of a help and an impetus to clear all these past life energies that were still kind of alive a little bit in my energy system. So we have to be aware of how multidimensional we are, and some of us are a little more, maybe more complicated than others, and maybe that's true for everyone. I don't know that part, but I know what's true for me, and I
So
know
can
what I've
I ask,
experienced.
do you know when you're in your natural state?
Not necessarily, but you know what I
Okay.
like to say? I really believe a really big signpost and threshold to look for is transcending judgment. And that, when I was
Wow.
playing with that 0 to 1,000 scale from the Power versus Force book, I discovered 800, transcend judgment. And like,
Wow.
when you think about transcending judgment, it takes a little time to pontificate and contemplate. But like, if you truly don't judge anything outside yourself or yourself, your world changes automatically and naturally. Absolutely.
I
Because when I say
yes.
I am as natural as I am right now, I'm kind of suspecting there's a little more natural coming my way, but I don't know for sure. I don't need to know. I'm as beautiful as I am. I'm as ugly as I am. I'm as kind as I am. I'm as mean as I am. Like, if you can retrain your thought processes and like truly stop judging yourself, that's a huge benefit
Okay,
to
so that
society.
that goes along with the saying that popped into me. I know it's not my original
Yeah,
thought, but the saying is there is no thing or nothing wrong. Everything is right. So there's no judgment. There is
right.
nothing wrong. Everything is right. There's a purpose and opportunity behind everything that's happening.
Well,
It's
that's
not
it.
wrong. It's all
Holistically,
right.
we played a role in creating the world as it is now. It's not to say I'm going to take all responsibility by myself, but I got really curious to say, okay, well, why is it like this? And then, more and more and more data comes in and go, okay, well, I'm going to do the best I can do now to recreate something nicer. But I actually do hold some responsibility, being that I was entrained into the system, society, and with our natural creator functions, we kept recreating the same reality with all its warts and all, right? And then when you start noticing the warts, oh, okay, wait a minute, I'm going to change now. I must change inside. And the outside has, from a quantum physics principle, my theory is that if I really get this right, the outside has no other option but to shift, because
Shift.
I believe we are projecting reality from within. So if we're looking at warts outside, guess where the warts started? And it might not be, you don't have to take it so personally. That's another, I have a good one liner. I would say it's nothing personal, it's simply physics. Like, think about that. It's
Mm.
not personal. However, if you want to deny reality, what is a human being? What is reality? Well, get used to the warts then. Like, come on, people, let's talk about it. Like, at least I would really, that's my biggest dream right now, is to just start some conversations. So that's where we're talking right now, and like,
I love it.
to attract more people to say, okay, what's reality, what's a human being? And then if
Yes.
they don't have the experience that I've had, I mean, are you willing to listen? Are you willing to hear? Because I've had this experience and I can authentically tell you, and my medical knowledge is all intact here, but I would never go and use it anymore because I think I found some better stuff. I think that's pretty
Awesome.
powerful.
Very. Do you
Yeah.
know, I have a consciousness, which I call an awareness. I
Mhm.
see them kind of similar.
I do
Um,
too. Absolutely.
yeah, that I am probably undoing. I mean, I want to believe this.
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm probably undoing a lot of karma that was not so good in this time in my life. I feel like I'm undoing some of the negative karma, and
Hmm.
I I like how that I was recently pointed to that the words we use,
Yeah.
the thoughts we have, contribute to the
Yes.
collective.
To the reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's really, I just saw too this little film. It was like only 15 minutes long. And it was about how any thought that you have that's not um appropriate to the governing system, you get fined for. So they end up being able to read your thoughts. They end
Right.
up fining you if you swear, and you can't do anything until you pay your fines. And they can
Oh,
all, and it's
I
in
could
your
see
home.
how that's like someone's creation, that some people might like that to be true. But you know what's interesting in that is, I think from a natural evolution point of view, there will be no secrets. So, but there's always two sides of the coin. There will be no secrets. To me, I see as a positive. However, it could be a little uncomfortable at first. Like, lying will not be possible. Where,
Yeah.
when you get to an evolved state, if someone's going to lie to me, I'm probably going to notice it. I mean, that's what my aspiration is anyway. And or at least, you feel the vibe is not, we're not on the same page. We're not vibing for the service to all. I mean, there's ultimate service to self, service to all mentality. And so once you get into the service to all, it just sort of seems to open up this potential and this human possibilities that are quite handy. And yet, there's going to be the transition time as everyone will individually choose it. I would see that it will become a more and more easy choice to make. But the way that the system, this unsustainable system of systems, has really shot down the messengers in all these new, more expanded possibilities. So of course people are afraid. I mean, that can come from past lifetimes even. And that has been so true for myself. Those persecution, which burned at the stake syndrome, I call it, and it's real. It stops you from being your full and true self. Even though, like, I don't feel like I would harm a fly like I do. I catch a spider, let him outside. But I mean, you can create this story, propaganda, to make people really fear free and natural human beings. And that is kind of trying to happen right now.
For
And
sure.
I think that's where we have to get our piece on and be as true and natural as we can.
Oh, I like that you say this because the word that keeps popping up
Mhm.
is integrity.
Absolutely.
We're not even going to speak, and people are going to know whether we're operating in
Right.
integrity or not.
Right.
And if you're not, there's going to be a consequence. And
Absolutely.
it's so interesting because you use the word choice. I think I'm understanding more and more that our choices are defining who we are. Like if
Absolutely.
you choose to get the vax, there's this. If you don't choose to get the vax, there's this. Like every
But I
choice
want to
is
throw in too, from the vaccine point of view, is that if we create a problem, we'll find a solution too. Just like you said, when there's a poison, the antidote's 3 feet
yes,
away. Because I think we
yes,
were talking about vaccine when you brought that in, weren't we?
yes, yeah.
Because I actually have a lot of kind of sense and perspectives of the solutions that will come through. But also, like when I think of my own theories of, quote, this physics of consciousness and what a human being is truly, when someone is taking that, thinking it's helping them, like if we are as powerful creators as we think, I think that does interact with the malevolent plan. And I see a lot of people in the consciousness community not recognizing that piece. I
Mm.
haven't heard really too many people outside myself feeling that, but I really do. I mean, I guess we're going to see. I'm going to observe. I'm not going to judge anybody's choice. My own family, every first degree family member I have has been vaccinated, except for my 10-year-old niece because she's not 12 yet. So her and I are the two that are remaining natural. But the truth is, I'm really watching my family because, you talked about your family origin. My family of origin, I suspect my parents' souls are very similar to mine, but they were, their witch burned at the stake syndrome made them much more cautious, and they were training me not to, don't be telling the truth because you might get hurt, out of love for me. And then my mom never had a good thing to say about medical science until some psychiatrist talked to her, and I was shocked to witness that. So it just goes to show, like, I think in these last decades, like, my parents, I was raised by a couple of rebels. Basically, they were judging. My mom was a social worker, so she saw lots of real time stuff, shared it with me, influenced my upbringing, and she got entrained into that, despite the fact that she didn't start there. You know,
She
so
started out as a lawyer, I think you said.
well, lawyer was her second. She became social worker
Oh,
first and then lawyer. Then she
oh,
completed, and her last job and role as a practicing lawyer was with the First Nations, that huge case with the residential schools. She was a federal lawyer on that team. A few
wow,
suicides came out of that work, let me tell you.
wow.
But my mom's tough, and she denied even any psychological, like, they were all encouraged to take some therapy for prevention of problems, and my mom even refused that. And it got to a point where I said to her, Mom, you need to retire. Like, you just need to retire. This is sucking your soul. It's so, you've done 10 years, you're good. Like, leave it to others now. So she
That
did.
recognition is beautiful because that ended up helping you, or you had it already in
Yeah,
you to see that for you
right.
when it
Yeah.
wasn't working for you.
Yes, exactly. And actually, it was
Yeah.
interesting. It's almost like, she was, when you're hanging out with all the same mindset all the time, I think we just had this really powerful moment where she was sharing some stories and I was just about throwing up, like, and I'm just like, oh my
Wow.
God, Mom, how can you work in this field
Yes.
for so long? And then she finally just, I think the only reason she took that job is she felt like she was too young to retire because she was
Mhm.
financially able to retire in her early 50s. And then she took another 10 years
Wow.
working federal. But I mean, at the same time, I see a perfection in that. Like, what a beautiful soul. Many elders, like she raced and went all over Alberta meeting elders to help them get some kind of settlement to help
Wow.
kind of pay back for some of the horrible things they would have experienced in residential schools, which were horrific, just beyond horrific. And I think my mom finally, I'm just like, okay, I actually am not capable of listening anymore. And oh my God. And then I think she started to notice, okay, and a couple people committed suicide and boom, she retired. So
What a
it's
beautiful
real.
model for you as a woman.
Actually,
See,
it really
yeah,
was. Yeah.
yeah. Uh,
She's quite a hero to me. And I mean, she influenced me in so many ways that she probably doesn't even know. One was that she was kind of one of those super moms of the 70s. And it was so funny because once I had children as a physician, I'm like, I'm not doing that. I know what that's all about. Whereas everyone else, I noticed, and I just happened to take notice that all the other women who chose to work and have kids all had moms who stayed home. But I had a mom who didn't stay home. And I'm like, nope, I'm not doing that.
oh my
I know what
goodness.
that involves. No, thank
Yes,
you. So I
yes.
actually really adored my stay-at-home mom days. It was so wonderful. It was a way better profession than being a physician, especially
Aw.
a part-time one. I mean, part-time, it really changed and it got even worse. Being part-time, you tended to attract the most dependent, codependent, weird patients who would like be so attached to you. And it was like,
Yes.
no,
You must
no.
have had to have learned about boundaries.
Oh, you bet. But I mean, I was pretty good at it, but maybe not as compassionate then as I am now. I was pretty, I was into efficiency and,
That's how you were entrained.
exactly,
Yes.
exactly.
My dear,
Yeah, we gotta
it's
go.
been lovely to go around all of these.
Yeah, we explored a lot of nooks and
Yes,
crannies. That was really
yes.
fun.
And we'll do it again, okay? If
You
that's
bet.
okay with
I
you.
actually really enjoy it.
Oh,
Absolutely.
good, good.
We have such interesting cross-linked experiences. It's fun.
Yes, I can relate to
And I,
some, not all. And there's enough for me to still be very curious.
yeah, exactly. No, it's fascinating. Thank you so much, Ida.
Thank you, Angele, and you have a lovely day. Nice to
Yes.
chat.
Yeah.
See you soon.
Okay, bye.
Ciao for now.